in Japan, yeah, they do have quite absurd beauty standards and interesting ways of describing people. Like, I remember when I put on weight, I'd have colleagues come up to me and go, "Oh, Chris Sensei, you have become big face." And I was like, "Oh, brilliant."
Wow.
Hello and welcome to the Abroad Japan podcast. Probably the best way of learning about life in Japan without actually being in Japan. I'm your host, Chris Broad, and we're joined as always by England's top Japan enthusiast, Mr. Pete Donaldson himself. Pete, how the devil are you doing? What's going on?
Hello, Christopher. I hope you are keeping well. I am not French. I'm not. I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah. It's the cold is starting to set in here in Southend. We had the Northern Lights last night.
No,
a few days in advance here. People who will know what date this came down will probably know that. We are recording a little bit in advance because you're away. But yeah, the Northern Lights came down to Southend, and
really,
I couldn't fucking see him. I couldn't see him anywhere. I stuck my head out my skylight and rotated 360 degrees. Could not see these blooming Northern Lights, and I don't think I ever will. Every time we spoke about the Northern Lights a couple of episodes ago on the Abroad Japan podcast, and I was in a situation where I went to Iceland to see the Northern Lights, and it was the week in which they weren't in Iceland. They would pop down to Newcastle for a bit, and so we had this beautiful kind of sunset last night. But could I see the Northern Lights? Could I? Rubbish. I think sometimes when people take pictures of the Northern Lights, they do turn up the saturation a little bit, and so there's probably a few parts of the old colour spectrum that my human eyes, my 43-year-old eyes, can't see, and yet the Samsung Galaxy S23s certainly can if you enhance.
Oh, I'm glad. Oh wait, you didn't see it. Sorry.
No.
Well, I'm glad you saw it.
Glad some of my football team sent pictures that they said that they'd taken themselves, which I don't believe them.
Well, speaking of weather phenomenon, there was obviously a hurricane in Florida, Hurricane Milton.
Yes.
Hopefully our wonderful listeners over in Florida are doing all right. I had quite a few messages from people because I posted a photo of Natsuki in the rain in front of Himeji Castle. I was like, "Oh, it's a bit rainy here." And I had lots of viewers from Florida I've had to leave my house. Oh, Christ.
Yeah.
But I hope everyone's doing okay there. Do you see this story? The story that's captivated social media of Lieutenant Dan, the man in the boat.
Lieutenant Dan.
This is a very Pete Donaldson story.
Oh, the guy who refused to leave his boat. I hope he's all right, silly sausage.
He's all right. He's fine. He survived it. So at first he was ridiculed. It was the stages of Lieutenant Dan, right? He was like, "God told me to live on this boat, and I'm not leaving for anybody." And so he's on this boat. The hurricane comes. Everyone's really worried he's going to die, but he survives, and he lived happily ever after. And it became sort of the focal point of the hurricane. All the social media were like, "Oh, I hope Lieutenant Dan's doing all right. Don't worry about the other, 100,000 people that had to leave. Just worry about Lieutenant Dan."
The silly man who's probably diverting resources towards saving him because he refuses to leave his boat.
But and then like a big streamer, a bit of a dickhead streamer called Aidan Ross offered to buy him like a $100,000 boat to say well done and give him a streaming deal and all these things. And then it took the whole sort of story nosedive somewhat because it turns out Lieutenant Dan isn't quite as nice as he appears to be. And the next thing I know, there's like articles everywhere. Lieutenant Dan is like a convicted criminal, and he's got and he's done some pretty gnarly things, like try and set a woman on fire more recently, with petrol.
Okay.
And now there's like mugshots of him everywhere. And it's just like, oh God, the internet, what a ridiculous place. Like we put someone on a pedestal and then bring them down so quickly when we discover their history.
And then almost immediately it's like that drifter guy who was like he was really cool. He got interviewed on the telly, and then he
murdered 8 people.
Oh dear.
But his criminal record includes drug possession, assault, resisting police, burglary, battery, and that's just a handful of the lesser crimes. But anyway, there you go. It's just this weird thing, this like narrative that I've been following online. It was like spammed to all my social media. Lieutenant Dan. And he's, and then it takes this dark turn. Of course it does. Anyway, I hope everyone in Florida is doing well, and I hope you don't run across Lieutenant Dan in a dark alleyway in Tampa. We got a story this week from Martin, who says, "Hello, Chris and Pete. Back in 2020, I achieved a lifelong dream of visiting Japan. In college, I fell in love with a woman who happened to be half Japanese, and years later, we decided to visit her family in Kanagawa for 2 weeks, with my mother-in-law showing us around. Being a lifelong Pokemon fan, I was determined to visit the Pokemon Center in Tokyo, which was at the top of my bucket list. Now, with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, I knew it was crucial to take them to the bathroom before getting in the long line. My wife and my mother-in-law took the kids to the family bathroom while I waited outside. A few minutes later, I heard an alarm, but assumed it was nothing serious, until I saw mall security rushing towards the bathrooms. After about a minute, and starting to feel concerned, I turned the corner to find my wife and mother-in-law bowing repeatedly, apologising to multiple security staff. What happened? Did they steal the toilet? I feared the worst, thinking we're about to be deported for some kind of terrible offence. But it turned out our 2-year-old had pulled the emergency cord in the bathroom, causing a panic while our 4-year-old was using the bathroom. After many apologies and reassurances, we were allowed to continue our day. We enjoyed the Pokemon Center and later laughed about the whole ordeal. Have either of you accidentally caused a scene while in Japan or in a bathroom? From Martin in Georgia. That's the point, right? The disabled toilets, or family toilets in particular, have like an emergency button or a lever that often looks like the flush lever. And I think I have pulled it once in my decade here. I've done it one time and heard like, and I quickly stopped it. So be advised, don't hit the wrong button. I'm glad it's there, in case of emergency, in case of someone having issues. But yeah, it can happen. It can happen. And I think Japanese staff are aware that it happens and won't be angry, so don't worry about it if you do make the mistake. You've never done it, have you, Pete?
No, I've nearly pressed the wrong button in many a toilet in various degrees of sobriety. I guess it's one of those things that kids will just pull on anything. So I guess it's kind of like they just grab it and they don't really know what it is, and then oh my god, I've made a kerfuffle. And Japan is the enemy of the kerfuffle.
That it is. What's this week's news story? It's a bit of a weird one, isn't it?
Well, I think every week we talk about we spoke at length about the beautiful lady contest. I forget what that is, Miss World, Miss Japan, or whatever.
Miss
While ago, Miss Japan. Beauty standards are fleeting and strange and movable. It's a movable feast. What people find attractive in one decade and what people find attractive in the next decade. Either way, a recent Dove marketing campaign titled "No More Kawaii Standards" has drawn backlash in Japan. They basically tried the sort of thing that they do in the West about self-esteem and body positivity and stuff.
Self-esteem, what a rubbish.
Self-esteem, who needs that? What use is that? The Dove Self-Esteem Project to empower women to love themselves at any shape, age or style. According to Dove, the No More Kawaii Standards campaign is a wake-up call against ideas of beauty that can have a negative impact on children, which sounds like a really good impetus, a really good sort of project. Except, at the end of the day, you're slinging soap, aren't you, really? Their kind of PR line was that it was fostering a greater sense of self-confidence in young people by encouraging them to disagree with those ideals, a positive message of empowerment, etc. But locals have been up in arms because some of the phrases printed on the ads... The actual beauty standards that Dove say that young women should stand up against, however, by specifically naming those beauty ideals, the campaign has drawn more attention to them. So basically, there's ones like
Barbara Streisand effect.
So there's very Japanese, very measured, very specific beauty standards that Dove have sort of brought up in their PR and marketing campaign. The No More Kawaii Standards campaign is the space between the eyes of 4 centimeters, 1.6 inches. Basically says that your eye. Some people think that your eyes should only be 4 centimeters apart. Which it sounds like a lot of Japanese people are going, I didn't know this beauty standard, and by putting that out there, you're making it harder for young people to grow up normal. Spec 110, which is the numerical value of one's height minus one's weight. It's considered a standard for determining whether someone is thin or not. I hate to think what I would go on that one. Mid-face 6 centimeters, the length from under the eyes to the lips. a criterion for determining whether or not your face is small. I don't have a tape measure with me right now. I've got some calipers somewhere. Maybe
Come on, measure that mid-face.
We can measure that mid-face. Mid-face 6 centimetres. If you weren't feeling self-conscious about your appearance before, says the piece, you likely are now. And so a lot of people are going, I didn't even know about these standards, and by putting them out there, you've made it more difficult for people to sort of grow up. And it's if I saw such full-on statements printed in big characters while commuting to school, I'd be so depressed. So it's basically just made people more aware of beauty standards they weren't aware of before.
You know, it's good when the ad campaign has to turn the comments off on YouTube.
Have you ever turned off your comments? Or have you ever done anything spicy that you've turned off your comments?
Unfortunately,
not. Like North Korea missile video. I thought that might be a spicy one.
No, I mean, no. I've never done anything that I consider to be twatty enough to justify it.
Right.
I don't know. I've never had to do it. And I think if you are in a situation where you've made a video and have to turn comments off, then you've done something pretty wrong at that point. Touch wood. Hopefully next week I have to make an apology for something. But I remember in Japan, they do have quite absurd beauty standards and interesting ways of describing people. Like I remember when I put on weight, I'd have colleagues come up to me and go, "Oh, Chris Sensei, you have become big face," and I was like, "Oh, brilliant." That's charming.
Fatoy.
Yeah, and like my friend once was told they had a little face, and they didn't know whether to take it as an insult or not. They were like, "Oh, you have a small face, small face." Is that an insult? Is that a compliment? Nobody really knows.
You'd use less makeup.
But did they have a 6 centimetre mid face? That's the real question.
Measure your friend.
Measure that mid face. Space between the eyes of 4 centimetres. Now I'm getting self-conscious. Fucking Dove for this stupid bastard campaign.
Hang on, so between the end of the eye and the start of the other eye, or is it like the pupils, or I don't know. This is one from my optician. One would suggest.
I don't know. I think you. I'm not your face. It looks like a face. No, the space is a mere 3 centimetres. It's not good enough.
I'm measuring the Titanic's deck as it smashes into the rocks. If I get involved measuring bits of my face.
What a stupid campaign though. And Dove sort of wrote a hashtag or something like, "There's no right answer to what's cute," but it's sort of like outlining what the answer is. Then be like, "This is what you should be like," but don't worry if you're not. It's just all a bit silly. But I mean, what do you expect from a fucking soap company? Honestly, that's all we can say on that matter, isn't it?
I mean, to be honest, if you do have a small face, they're probably annoyed about people who do have small faces because you'd use less soap. So they're like, "We want big faces. Get as fat in the head as you want, because I want you're going to go through our soap more."
That's a very good point. Dove should be encouraging people to eat more. Why not double your body, your BMI?
Double your body. You'll use twice as much soap if you're bigger.
Twice the body mass index. Thrice the soap, triple the sales. Dove's campaign. That's the sort of dystopian future that I want.
Tabe mass day, body mass.
That would be brilliant. That's a beautifully dystopian ad campaign that I want to see. Companies trying
fatten the calf.
Fatten up their people. Well, it's a bit like the drugs companies, isn't it? The jab, where you take the jab or the medicine, the magic pill that makes you lose weight by making you feel full. There's something quite dystopian about that. Although it is actually saving a lot of lives and doing a lot of good, but it's also kind of like, shouldn't we be teaching our society to maybe eat less cheese? I mean, I don't think we should, but anyway, I feel like it's eat what you want, get fat, then take the magic pill that makes you lose weight. Maybe I'll be on it soon before the fucking year's out. But mark my words, Pete, I'm gonna get into shape, just like I do every year. Seesaw abroad. You
do seesaws actually, because but you go from going, I've eaten too much fried chicken to, I'm doing a big run in some dirty field for 3 hours. It's weird.
It's true.
Strange.
I'm not alone in it. I always sort of put pressure on myself, like, I've got to lose weight. But I'm not alone in this. If I look at all my friends, I'd say the vast majority sort of go up and down in their weight. It's a sort of minority, of which you are a part of, that maintains their weight and lives happily ever after. Yes, you do.
Neither of those things are true, Christopher. I've never been heavier. My joints, my arthritic joints are screaming right now. Awful.
Oh dear.
Awful business.
But I'll get on it. I'll get on it right away when I've got a free moment to lose weight. But yeah, it's tough when you're travelling around the country. And I do maintain in Japan, it is quite hard to be on the go and eat healthily. Convenience stores are sort of shit if you want to eat in a healthy manner. I don't care what people say. Like, it's really quite hard compared to the UK. If I was living in the UK, I'd be a fit young man. The body of a 28-year-old, I'd look great.
No, you wouldn't. Do you do much? Because you don't really sort of do much cooking for yourself, do you? The thing that helped me ship about a stone. Oh God, back end of the year before last, year before this one, was because I was doing one of those like meal kits, kind of Hello Fresh.
Yeah, we did that.
The enemy of my stomach is very much just overeating, and then there was just sweets. Every time I finish that food, I'm just like, I just need my sweeties. And I got a big bowl of sort of Halloween Haribo for the children coming round for Halloween, and that's been seen off. The children aren't getting individual
anything.
Packs of Haribo. No, they're not getting anything. I've eaten them all.
Trick or treat. I fucking ate it all. I mean, yeah.
I'm like a little one of those little Japanese tanukis. with a rice field hat on. Hello.
Well, you have the mid face of a tanuki, so you know.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
They've got little faces.
I'm so happy to have learned that phrase, mid face. That is a word that I've always wanted. I wanted to know that. I'm so happy about that.
Mid-voc.
Going to go around measuring people's faces now with a tape measure. Be a video that will. A solid episode.
I think one of the Pokemons do that. You can fall asleep and measure your face.
Really? Jesus. I need to catch up on my Pokemon.
I think they paint on their face. Well, they make a new Pokemon every 5 minutes. One's just a fucking ring of keys. Rubbish.
And the people keep buying it over and over. Good stuff.
Yep.
We're back in just a moment, guys, with your stories, comments and questions over in the fax machine.
Wow.
And we're back with the fax machine. What have we got this week from our listeners, Mr. Dawson? Fill us in.
Dear Chris and Pete, as you're both chicken-eating fans, where are all the chickens kept? I don't think I've ever seen a live chicken on any of your videos. Is there a field somewhere rammed full of chickens? Is there a secret underground barn? Probably that one. Do they import all of their chicken? And what about cows? Love the show. Trish, it's right, actually. I don't think I've ever seen a chicken in Japan. I don't think I've ever seen a cow in Japan. Yeah. Where are all the cows and the chickens? What's going on, Chris?
It's a very good question because I often wonder the same thing.
The Foo Fighters song, For All the Cows.
Yeah.
Where
I mean,
are they all?
a lot of Japan's meat is imported, right, from Australia, Thailand, Vietnam, China. Like famously, a few years ago, McDonald's had that scandal in Japan where a video of a Chinese worker in a chicken nugget factory was caught dropping all this pulped up minced chicken crap all over the floor, and they picked it up and sort of plopped it back in the grinder, and basically McDonald's Japan shifted all of their chicken nugget production over to Thailand. But they do have chickens in Japan. Japan does have chickens, but they are few
like
and far between.
Truther to me. sounds like you're part of big chicken. Sounds like your love of chicken is extended to getting free chicken from Family Chickie.
I think the place that has the most chicken farms is Miyazaki over in Kyushu. Has some pretty big chicken farm, and maybe Akita as well, famous for the Hinai Jidori chicken, the most chicken in Japan. So yeah, Akita and Miyazaki probably lead the charge. But yeah, it's quite rare in Japan in general to see any animals grazing in the fields, right? Cows, chickens, pigs. They are few and far between. It's one of the things I notice the most whenever I go back to the UK, driving around the countryside. It's like, oh, wow, there's an animal in that field. Sugoi. Yeah. It's amazing. I miss that. We got a question from Paul. He says, hello, Chris and Pete. My singing is usually for my ears only. Singing aloud in my car when driving alone, sorry. Is going to a karaoke place alone more common in Japan, or is it more of a group activity? I've memorised several Japanese pop songs to try and find out. I may need to get drunk first, though, says Paul from East Yorkshire. I mean, it's quite common in Japan for people to go alone. I used to have quite a few students, actually. I'd be like, what are you doing after school today? What's going on? What are you up to? And they were like, oh, I'm going to go karaoke. I'm like, oh, with friends? So they were like, no, I'm just going to go alone and have a sing-song. So it is quite common to find people doing it. And if you go to some karaoke booths in Sendai, you might find Ryotaro doing some work on his laptop because he tends to use karaoke booths as his go-to workshop when he's travelling around the country. So, yeah, there's no shame in going alone. It's quite common. I would say it's more common for people to go as part of a group still. But, yeah, it's pretty common. So, yeah, don't worry about it. Have you ever gone alone, Pete? I've never done it.
No, there are kind of like karaoke bars, like bars that do have karaoke machines that we probably get a bit of an audience. So if you're kind of a little bit self-conscious about going in by yourself, go to one of those bars, have a little go, give us that machine, I want to do some singing.
Have a sing-song.
Blast some out, yeah.
It does take some confidence to sing in front of a bar of people, though. I mean, that was probably my first karaoke experience, was in a snack bar in Yamagata, doing it, and the snack bar girls like cheering you on and making you sing. And you want to go home, but they force a microphone into your hands with some whiskey, and off you go. After a few drinks, though, it's doable. There's no fear, but it's an experience unto itself, singing karaoke in a Japanese bar. We got a question from Jason, who says, "Hello, Chris and Pete. I have a question for each of you, if I may. Chris, what is Japan's overall view towards foreign military personnel? As somebody in the UK military, if whilst in Japan I get asked what my job is, would the reception be favourable if I explain what I do?" And Pete says, "I too love a good drink." Why is that specific to Pete? I too love a good drink, Pete, but as I'm getting older, I've found my hangovers are much worse. And what products, drinks or snacks can you recommend in Japan which will help me not only overcome my hangover, but get me feeling ready to experience more of Japan's nightlife? I love that question about alcoholism is aimed at Pete. Thank you both, guys. Keep up the good work. Jason from the UK. Pete, what do you do?
What do I do? I mean,
Raging drunkard,
isn't it? I mean, like, I have found. I tell you what, the modern life being as it is, there's a lot of. I'm a lager drinker, and there are a lot of really good Asahi 0% is really good. If you can, without anybody knowing, have a normal alcoholic lager, then the next one have a non-alcoholic lager, then the next one have alcoholic lager. If you can find a pub that does that, that really, really helps out, because at the end of the day, it's, after the first couple, it's diminishing returns anyway. So that can help. Just piling the water. Big fan of Paramol, codeine, and paracetamol. But you do get. I went out.
It's all a bit overdosey. God.
Yeah, I went to Leicester for a few beers on last weekend, and where I went to university. And my God, like 2-day hangovers, man, cracking on for 3 days. If we're completely honest with ourselves, you just don't feel it's not right. But I did dance to Limp Bizkit, so
living the dream.
I'm a big boozer and a dancer. And the problem with like dancing places, they're usually open till about 4 o'clock. So you're just constantly, I've done some dancing. I need another beer. Need another Guinness.
I really don't enjoy drinking half as much as I used to. I mean, when bloody Lost Bar opened in Shibuya in August, I was down there like half the month drinking myself silly. And the hangovers were disastrous to my busy work schedule. So like, I don't drink that much. I like having a glass of wine at night. Bit of red wine helps me sleep. Probably something I shouldn't get into the habit of. On the subject of, working in the military and telling people in Japan, people don't mind. Yeah, I think people will be curious and excited, and they're not going to be like, "You're a soldier." Oh no, like it's not going to be like that at all. I think it will probably lead to some interesting conversations, if anything, Jason. I think when I started reading that question, I thought, is it towards military personnel operating in Japan, i.e., lots of American bases in Japan? But no, if you're coming here as a tourist talking about your job, I think they'll be quite favourable. I think they'll be quite curious as to what you do and what kind of things you're up to. So fear not. Don't worry about your job. Don't hide your job. Tell people what you do. I think they'll be intrigued at your UK military career. Keep the stories, questions, comments coming in to brawnjapanpodcast@gmail.com, or let us know what you want to do in life in the comments below on YouTube. Let us know.
It's the what do you want to do in life podcast, after all. We want to know what you want to do in life.
We're having a major change, major shift in direction. But for now, guys,
change up,
have yourself a great few days. We'll see you right back here to do it all again on the Abroad in Japan podcast. Bye for now. Have a good one.
Bye.